yes, Sunday and last Wednesday and this last Sunday and Thursday. Midweek Bible study. And then we had worship this last Sunday, and they send you greetings, and I think we made a good showing for ourselves there. So thank you very much. They appreciate the support that we give them, both in prayer and financial support. As far as announcements are concerned, I don't have anything new necessarily that I was to be given. I do know that I was delivered a message, and I don't know if it was made here, about Sister Head, Janola Head, is now in assisted living over close to her son. So that's probably the best case for her at this time. So she's not by herself and worried about something worse happening with her. So please continue to remember Sister Janola and her new circumstances, her new surroundings, and that'd be the very best thing for her that could possibly happen. I would ask that you remember Michael Rowland, who is my nephew, Heather's sister's son. He is going to be undergoing a minor procedure tomorrow. They're going to take a mass off of his chest. They don't think there's anything wrong, but of course, like they always do, they're going to send it off for analysis to make sure that there's nothing further to it. But it's more of a cosmetic thing than anything, but they want to check and make sure that there's no issues. So I ask that you remember him as he undergoes his procedure tomorrow. I also ask that you remember the Heydrich family. Is a family up in Woodstock. Loretta Heydrich, who is the lady that we know up there, her father was found in his pool, at the bottom of his pool. They pulled him up. He was still breathing, and they took him to the emergency room, but he did end up passing away. They've had his memorial service, but it was such an unforeseen thing, and the tragedy of an unexpected death is certainly fresh in their minds. But ask that you please remember the Heydrich family in your prayers. I've been knowing both of their sons, for quite some time. He also, up at the Woodstock congregation, his memorial service was last week. He finally passed from his illness, and his memorial was last week. We'll continue to leave their name in the bulletin for a little while, but he was 14 years old. Very, very young. To die of something. He had been suffering for this for quite some time. But his suffering is ended. His parents' suffering, though, is just beginning. So please remember his family, the Vetranos, in your prayers. Please. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Susie Corley, that's Mom's cousin, on her mom's side, is having surgery tomorrow. Bladder surgery, so please remember her in your prayers. Anyone else? Anything else? Anybody else? Yes, ma'am. Okay. Miss Anita's niece got a good report from her kidney doctor. That's good. Right. Okay. Very good. And what's her name again? Because Carol Johnson. Okay. Got that. Miss Anita's niece, Carol Johnson, had a good report from a kidney doctor. That's great. What are they going to? Is there anything continuing from that, or is they're pretty much done? Okay. Prayers for continued improvement. All right. Very good. Certainly, we'll do that. Yes, ma'am. Okay. Miss Rachel's sister Esther is having surgery tomorrow, and we want to remember her in our prayers as well. Procedures and all this surgeries and everything like that going on. A lot of folks are having those, and we certainly want to remember them, that they're successful for one, that they come through them with no problems for the other. Improvement can be made. We also want to remind everybody of our fifth Sunday. I want to remind everybody of our fifth Sunday fellowship. So we're going to have our luncheon next door after morning worship. come back over here and we'll have our song service on the fifth Sunday as opposed to the fourth Sunday. So we'll want to remind everybody of that. So on fifth Sunday, bring food, whatever you might want to eat, bring it with you. We'll eat, and we'll come back over here and have our song service. Potluck. Just bring food, whatever you think you might want to eat, whatever somebody else might want to eat. We usually have a pretty good crowd, so just bring a little bit for yourself and another person. We usually have plenty. All right. Anything else? Anyone else? Folks usually say, I've told them about it, so they'll like to say, we'll have a pretty good crowd. All right. Let's go ahead and have a word of prayer. Our Father in heaven, we're thankful for the day. We're thankful for our blessings. We're thankful, Lord, for the respite from the rain. We pray, Lord, that you continue to provide the things for us that we need, the physical blessings as well as the spiritual blessings. We pray, Lord, your healing hand on those that we've mentioned tonight. There's so many, Lord, that are sick. They're ill. They're under doctor's care. They're undergoing procedures and surgeries. They're taking medicine, undergoing treatment, and all of the things that we've mentioned. We have them, both the ones we've mentioned tonight, the ones that are in our bulletin, Lord, the ones we're not even aware of. We ask, Lord, that you be with them, that you strengthen them, that you make them better, so they can continue to live their lives the way they used to. We are mindful, Lord, of those of our congregation, especially that are going to be undergoing some things. And we ask, Lord, that you bless them in the way that they most need. We ask that you, Lord, bless those who have recently lost loved ones, comfort them, strengthen them. Mostly mindful of the Toronto family, lost Parsons, such a young man, sick for so long, but we know, Lord, that he is no longer in pain, no longer suffering. He has shed the earthly bonds of his body, and he is in a better place. But Lord, he leaves many friends and loved ones behind, and we pray, Lord, that they are comforted, that they're strengthened, that they're encouraged by their church family. We are thankful, Lord, for our church family. And we know that many times we're closer to our church family than we are our own physical family. And that's the way it should be. We are a family. We love one another, and we want what's best for one another, and help us always act in that way. We ask your blessings on those who may still be traveling. We know that a lot of the schools are going to be getting back to school very soon. We pray your blessings on these young people as they go back to school. Be with them and be with their teachers, be with their parents. We ask that you be with those who are still traveling because of vacation and the summer months. And we pray, Lord, that you give them safe passage to their destination back to us again. Lord, be with us as we go through this study tonight, and we ask, Lord, that you help bless us with an understanding, and that we can be encouraged and we can be uplifted by reading your word as we are meant to be, that we can be chastened by it when we need to be, we can be rebuked by it when we need to be. We're thankful for your word. We're thankful that you are a loving God that has blessed us with your word, that we can know how we best please you and grow in your understanding. Be with us, Lord, and keep us safe. All right. Yeah. The congregation at Whitehall, they have at least 3 members that watch our services, streaming services, and classes and everything like that. So it's a good thing. And it's not just there. We've got. I look back at several of our videos, and we have multiple, 10, 20, 30 views. Maybe those are multiple visits, but sometimes that's brand new. So what we're doing is a good thing, and people are encouraged by it. That's what we certainly want to have happen. I'm glad that we're able to do that. We're blessed by being able to do that. It's interesting to tell you a little bit about the congregation there. They have around 10 members, sometimes a little bit more. Has people that are traveling, and it kind of fluctuates. And, when the congregation of 10 people fluctuates, sometimes attendance can be very low, sometimes it can be up to full strength. Right now they're meeting in a storefront, but they have purchased a house where they are converting it into a full-time church building. It's a nice little piece of property, and they're really looking for some growth, and we want to. I encourage you. As a matter of fact, it might be something we need to put in the bulletin, because I really want to encourage you to pray for the congregation. They have a great preacher, John Dufford, and I'm still working on getting him to come and speak. He would be a very interesting speaker for us. He does not fit the mold. As a matter of fact, I got a picture for you of me preaching Sunday. He's in a pullover. Yeah. Oh, you want me to try that here? But he is a student of the Word. That man knows his Bible, and they are blessed to have him there. He never met someone that he wouldn't study with, worship, and bring to worship and everything like that. But anyway, they're in a good position, but we want to pray for their increase, whether it's numeric, whether it's spiritual, or both, preferably both. But he asked me to send greetings to the congregation here. All right. I was asked, are we going to continue our thing? I don't think I am. I think we're done with Mars Hill. Let's climb down off Mars Hill. Let's do something else. Okay? We're going to try something else. This is a one note, maybe one class. I don't know. We might go a little bit longer with it. This is a question I've been asked so many times. You know, it's interesting. They say, "I hear you're a preacher. Let me ask you a question." Well, you never know what somebody's going to ask you. You have no idea. You're a Christian. Oh, you're a Church of Christ. I've heard that a lot. Let me ask you a question. You never know what they're going to ask. Is this a loaded question? Are they genuinely interested, intellectually stimulated enough to ask a true question? Or is this one of those gotcha questions? You feel like Jesus. When they're trying to catch him in something. Well, if you believe this, then why this? But you know what? One of the questions I get a lot of is, if there is a God, why does He allow man to suffer? Why is there suffering in the world? If there is a God. Now the question isn't if there is a God, the question is, why is there suffering in the world? Even if you took God out of the equation the still is there. Why is there suffering in this world? That's a good question. Listen, we're creatures, and we feel pleasure, we feel pain, and the idea of suffering. And when I was working on the lesson, I really thought back to my friends, the Vetranos in Woodstock. And I thought about that, and I'm driving down the road, and I'm looking in the back, and I'm seeing my two girls, and they're talking to each other, and they're playing around. Sometimes they aggravate one another, but I'm looking back there, and I think, how would I feel if one of those little girls was taken from me before it was, in my mind, time for her to go? What if I lost them prematurely in my own mind? I can imagine that I would be probably one of the most miserable human beings in existence. That's all there is to it. I would be an absolute shell of a man for quite some time because of the attachment that we form, the human bonds that we form with one another, right? We love one another. I think about what would happen if somebody from one of our members from this congregation was taken, and it happens. We're not immune to it as Christians, right? We're not immune to the ills of the world. Wouldn't it be great if we weren't? You become a Christian, then that opens up a whole other problem. Sure. And I would imagine, I think about how any of us feel when we suffer loss, whatever that loss might be. Of course, where do we want to go? Let's go to Job chapter 3. Job chapter 3. The idea is, why is there suffering? Why is there suffering? Okay. In Job chapter 3, and we're going to read several verses of it, 20 through, if we get through it, 20 through 26, I can honestly say that this particular portion of Scripture, this little bit of Scripture, I think we find the key question to the entire book of Job, really, is what it comes down to. I think everything that we find in the book of Job can be summed up in a very few short verses, okay? In today's language, we probably ask, why do good men suffer bad things? Because we know that Job was a righteous man, right? How do we know that? Right, it says so in the very first book of chapter, right? What does God say about Job? He says what? Behold my servant Job. Okay? It says he was a blameless man. Now, does that mean that Job never sinned? No, of course not. But see, people want to jump to that conclusion. They say blameless. It means that when he sinned, it was not an ongoing thing. When he found himself in error, what did he do? He offered up sacrifice to God to have that sin removed from his account, so that he could continue to serve Him blamelessly. Blame could not be laid at his feet. By all accounts, we read that Job was, of anybody that we read in the Bible, he was a very good man. I mean, in the true sense of the word. He was a righteous man. And what does God do to Job? What does God do on behalf of Job to even Satan? What does he do to him? He what? Okay, he tests. What does he do for Job? Okay, he put a hedge around Job, but what does he do? What does he do in regards to Satan? He confesses him. Remember that. God confesses Job before Satan. This is I'm not saying this is a type of any sort. What I'm saying is when we think about this idea of God confessing Job before Satan, this goes right back to what's going to happen to us if we're found to be a servant of God. What is going to happen to us when this life is over and we stand before God on judgment? If we confess the name of Christ, what is going to happen? Our name is going to be confessed before God. Okay? That concept we see even here today. All right. So we understand, why do good men suffer bad things? We know that Job was a good man, and he suffered some bad things. And it goes into excruciating detail about what happens to Job. We're not going to get into all of that. That's not really the point of the lesson. The point of the lesson is to answer this question that we're asking. Why do good men suffer these things? And we don't get in a short, simple statement, do we? It's not a short, simple statement, is there? No. The question about suffering, why do we suffer? Why do bad things happen to us? Why do the ills of the world sometimes befall us? Let me explain something. There's nothing we're going to get out. I don't want to say there's nothing. But we're not going to get everything out of it in one short sitting. Even if we came back next week and went over the same thing again, we're not going to get everything that we need to know in 2 short sittings, or 3, or 4, or 5. Listen, it sometimes takes a lifetime to understand the concept of suffering, our portion of suffering, what God's part in it is, if there is a part that He has in it, what our part is in suffering, because we've talked about that before, remember? We discussed this a couple of, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, the idea of why is there, the different types of suffering that we bring upon ourselves. There's incidental. Sometimes things just happen. You're driving down the road, and some bizarre turn of events causes you to have an accident. Well, you have this accident, and you're severely hurt, sometimes permanently injured in it. Did we have a part in that? No. It's just one of those things that happen in the world where a lot of people live, and a lot of things happen. A lot of decisions are made. Sometimes they're not all very good. Doesn't mean there was malice on somebody else's part either, right? Okay. Sometimes we're allowed to suffer because it tests us. Sometimes we're allowed to suffer because it humbles us. But the question at the end of the day is, there is no one short answer for it. It's something that stretches out over a lifetime. Okay? It's a lifetime of discovery, prayer, devotion, and study, and all of these things. And at the end of the day, what it really all comes down to is submission. That when we suffer, when we submit to that suffering, it doesn't mean we embrace it. Okay? Anybody that just, I'm so glad that I have chronic pain. I'm so happy that I have chronic pain. I wish I had more chronic pain because the more I get, the better off I am. No, how many people embrace suffering? It's the idea of submission to it. The realization that sometimes suffering has something to teach us. Okay? So, going on a little bit this. All right, one thing we need to note in this passage, you'll notice that Job or any of his friends never questioned the existence of God. Okay? That's never brought up. So the idea if there is a God, why is there suffering? That has no bearing on the issue. No bearing on the issue. Okay? They never questioned the concept of the existence of God, and that shouldn't be something that enters into our mind. When I start to suffer, I don't start saying, well, why is it, if there's a God, why is He allowing me to suffer? We can't allow our suffering to make cracks in the foundation that we built in the understanding of God. What we need to do is look at suffering through the understanding that there is a God, and there's a part that He played in our acceptance, in our submission, in our understanding of suffering. But the idea of, well, this should shake my belief in a God, that doesn't make that makes no sense to the Christian. It's been said oftentimes, I believe, I've heard people say, I used to believe in God until I opened my eyes to the suffering of the world. I have to ask myself, if there's really a God out there, why does He allow good people to suffer? At that point, you're using the problems of the world to justify a disbelief in God. Well, sure, absolutely. Yeah. Well, there you have there you sum up Satan's position at the very beginning of it, right? What does he do? He said, well, of course he believes in you. Of course he worships you. You've built a hedge around him and his family. You've given him everything he could possibly desire. Take that away, and what does he say he'll do? Curse you to your face. There's no difference between cursing God to his face and saying I don't believe in him anymore. At that point, your heart's been turned against him entirely. Okay, so that's what Satan's position is in the first place. That's why he's trying to tempt. Thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. That's what he tempts him with. Satan tempts God because Satan has no regard for God in that way. Okay, absolutely. But what we have to do is we have to look through everything we do. We look through it through the lens of there is a God, but what's at work here? What's happening? What's going on? And I think when we do that, and when we look at it, maybe over the next week, 2 weeks, we'll come to maybe a little bit better understanding about why they're suffering and what answer there is. And it's not going to be the answer for the world, is it? It's not going to be the answer for the world. Right? Why? Why is that? Why will our understanding after we look at these verses, why will that not be the answer that the rest of the world is going to embrace? Yeah, but that's a given. But why won't they? And that's true. That's true. They don't know God. But why won't that be enough for them? And see, what they're doing is they're looking through something to bolster an argument that they already have. Okay, that's why they look at it. They're not looking to do an intellectually honest discussion about why suffering happens. They're looking at it to bolster. It's incredible how many times I've seen people they'll watch a video and they'll post a comment below it. Somebody gets hurt. Well, the idiot should have done that. Is that me? I want to make sure I'm not. Never mind. Okay. I tell you what. Let's go ahead and get into it. We got to know that the problem of evil, which many times causes suffering, sometimes it is evil. It does not disprove God. It actually proves God. If there's evil, there must of necessity be something that is good. When you hear people talk about evil in this world, you can't discuss evil unless you discuss good. If there is evil, then there is good. Otherwise, you're using terms that have no basis in reality. The presence of evil doesn't disprove God; it only improves the chances of there being a God. If we define things the way that we should define them. All right, so let's look at this. Verse 20. Let's look at verse 20. Somebody read verse 20 for me in just verse 20. Okay. Why is life given to who? Those in misery. All right. So here, Job is asking, he's wondering aloud why God is still keeping him alive when he desires death. Job has already said, I would rather be dead. I would rather die. And truthfully, looking at the things that happen to him, I can understand that. I lose a job. If I'm out there in the workforce and I lost my job, I can't say that I would want to die because I lost my job. Some people might. But I think most people look, I'm aggravated. I may be mad. I may be very sad. But at the end of the day, I can get up and I can go and I can find something else. It may not be as good. It may be in a whole different field. At the end of the day, but if you look at the losses that Job suffered and what would happen to him is it progressively got worse. He started losing his livestock. That's pretty bad because back then, how did you count your wealth? Livestock. I mean, and that's how the Bible counts as wealth. It has so many thousand heads of this, so many thousand heads of this, so many thousand heads of that. This is what happens. People come down, the raiders come down, they invade, they carry it away. And then while that servant was standing there, another one came in and said the same thing. While he had just finished speaking, another servant enters the picture and says he's been taking all this kind of stuff away. But the culmination of it all was what? When they came and they told him, all of your children were gathered in the oldest son's house to having a party. They were enjoying themselves. And that idea of youth and being excited and having their youth and their vigor and their the future ahead. They're all gathered together and they were making merry in your oldest son's house. And what happened? 4 winds come, knock the house over, and did any of them escape? Killed every one of them. I have a feeling that Job's like Job at one point. He's looking at the dollar signs, right? He's got so many thousand heads of this, so many thousand heads of this, so many thousand heads of this, so many thousand, and he's looking at this. As the servants come in, he's devastated, of course, at the brazen raiders coming in and taking away his stuff. But he's watching his wealth disappear. It's like, okay, well, all right, I can recoup from this. He's saying in his mind, I can get behind this. I can get away from this. Okay, I lost that. That's all right. I still have this, and this. I can still make it. I can still make it. And they come in. And basically, by the end of this conversation with him and his servant, what's left? Nothing. He has no physical wealth left. Because that's what his wealth was in. His wealth was in his livestock. At this point, he has no livestock left, so his entire wealth is gone. But Job still had the ace, the card of his sleeve. He still had his ace of his sleeve, because he still has children. He still has sons and his daughters. And at that point in the world's history, at that point in the history of God's people, your children were still your greatest treasure. Because at the end of the day, even if you were left with nothing, you still had your children who would help. They would assist you. They would support you. That was their job. That was given to them to do. So, he's thinking, okay, all my wealth is gone, but I've still got this left. And then when that servant, it was when that servant came and gave him that news. What happens after the servant comes in and gives him that news? It says he falls to the ground. Okay? He's devastated. This was the final devastation. This was it. He had been stripped of everything that he held dear. First, his wealth, he was happy with that, but the Lord gives him, the Lord takes it away. That's no problem. Boy, when the kids are, can you imagine that kind of devastation that would occur when somebody came and told you that, if my house burned to the ground tomorrow, as long as we get out of there fine, get the dog, we'll be okay. We'll be okay. We'll survive. I'll get the dog by the collar on the way out. I don't hate the dog. I pick the girls because, hey, tell the dog you love it. I'm not going to tell that dog I love that dog. But anyway, if we all got out of the house okay, I could say, you know what? The sun will rise and we'll be all right. We're going to be okay. The Lord gives. He blessed us with it. It's His. If He desires to take it away, He can take it away. But let me tell you, somebody comes up to me, I get that knock on the door. There's a police officer. He's going to give me some news that's going to shake me to my core. I can tell you right now, I'd be falling on the ground. I don't know what I'd do. He'd be broken. But here's Job, and this is where he is. All right, Job here is describing the depth of his suffering, and he says, "Why is life given to those who don't want it anymore?" He's asking. He really honestly doesn't know why God allows him to remain alive. What does he want to do more than anything else? He wants to die. He is ready to die. And this concept of, he said he uses some symbolism in verse 21, and we'll read it here in just a couple of seconds. Why allow him to suffer like this? And that question it certainly is there. We ask ourselves, why am I still alive? Why am I still around? Why does God allow? I would rather die. And the fact that we're not dead, the fact that God still does allow us to walk the earth even after we've suffered great sorrow and great suffering, tells us what? To everything there is there's a purpose to everything. When we are spared, what does that tell us about our, it's the obligation, but it is an obligation. It certainly is an obligation. When we go through suffering, and we're allowed to live through that suffering. That's not suffering that ends in death. It's suffering that's an ongoing thing. What is our responsibility in that case? To look for our purpose, to determine a purpose. Not a purpose for the suffering, but a purpose for ourselves in the suffering. Right? Is that difficult to do? Why is it difficult to do, folks? That's right. Sometimes did Job, when he heard that bad news, did Job get up and say, well, you know what? That's okay. I could still make this work. I still have a no. He said he sat and he was miserable and he was mourning. And the mourning period back then, I think sometimes we expect people to quit mourning quicker than they should, right? Somebody suffers a great loss and we kind of expect them, well, it's kind of time that you get back out of, you get yourself out of this and let's get back to, man, try to tell them that somebody who's lost a loved one. We need to snap out of it. Okay. Okay. So he's concentrating on something right now. Is concentrating on something. He's mourning the loss of and if when they gave him the report about his sons and his daughters, I have a feeling that his livestock completely he completely went out of his mind. That he was no longer thinking about the money he had lost. He was no longer thinking about being poor now. He was thinking about the loss of his children. Because that was he was so proud of his children. He took care of them. He raised them. Said that he would offer sacrifices in case they had done something wrong. He went and would offer sacrifices on their behalf. He was a good father. He loved his children. And I imagine, like every good father loves his children, if something bad happens to your family, anything else just sort of loses. It leaves your head, leaves your mind. You don't care about that. And this is where Job is. But he's asking, why am I still alive if this has happened to me? Why was I spared? As like any other good father, you think you could have wished he had changed places with his kids? I'd give you my life for my children. Hey, if you're going to take anybody, take me. Leave my children alone. Leave my children alive. At this point, he's not, and remember, Job was playing blind. He has no idea that this conversation has gone on between God and Satan. He has no idea. He is, and to have the situation play out the way it's supposed to, that's the way it needed to be. Job didn't need to be privy to that conversation. The whole point was, if you take this away from him, he'll curse you. Now, if you take away his health, he'll really curse you then. Of course, Satan was wrong on both counts, as Satan is wont to be. But yeah, if something like that happens, sometimes we would just rather be dead. And this is the depth of his suffering. He would rather be dead than alive. And he asks, why? Why am I allowed to live if this is the problems that I'm having? This is the suffering man that's talking, right? And a lot of people who suffer reason this way. You talk to spouses who have been married even a short period of time, but especially those who have been married a long period of time. And when one goes, the other one says, you know what, I don't want to be here anymore. She was my life. He was my life. I'm ready to go now. I'm ready to go now. And I mean, listen, I had a mother-in-law that her husband died when he was very young. I think he was about my age when he passed. And for the rest of her existence on this earth, she mourned his passing. And several times I caught glimpses of it, veiled conversation, but certainly conversation that she would be perfectly fine if she went on. It was her life. She was ready to go. So, lest we think that this is a very a small concentrated group of people, a lot of people feel this way. I'm hurting. There's pain in my life, physical or otherwise, emotional, spiritual. I would rather be dead than alive. Is that a healthy thing? Yeah, it is. I don't want anybody to say, no, that's not healthy. It is healthy. That's healthy because that's giving a voice to the kind of pain. It's hard to sum up sometimes how badly we feel. And when somebody says, I would rather be dead than alive, I understand that. It doesn't mean that, and here Job's not saying that he's going to take his own life. He never approaches that idea of, I'm just going to end my own life to end my suffering. But he does ask, why am I spared? Why am I still alive if I'm hurting this bad? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Well, let's put this down. Let's put this down. Thinking of the idea, the concept, that's true. I've seen a lot of. It seems like more women than men. You don't see as many older widowers, but you see a lot of older women in the church that there's a purpose to them, and they've determined that purpose, and part of it is informed by the suffering that they endured, right? We're going to be listing these anyway. We might as well go ahead and put it down. Why is there suffering? Sometimes, not in every case, but sometimes suffering gives us purpose. It often gives us purpose. We've gone through this struggle, and what we have to do is we have to see, okay, as Job was spared for a reason. He didn't know that. He's still questioning it. Why am I alive when I would rather be dead? Why? He even prayed to God to just go ahead and strike me down. Go ahead and, it's interesting. He had the opportunity. As his wife says, curse God and die. He had that opportunity, but he didn't do that. But he did ask God, why don't you just destroy me? Why don't you just kill me? Why am I still alive when I'm dead? God had a purpose for Job. And after it was all said and done, he blessed twice as much as he had before. I think that even Job would say, though, while that was recompense, he would rather have had his family back from before. I don't know any parent that would say, "Oh, well, I've got kids at the end. That's okay. That'll make up for the ones that died." I don't think that's what he's saying. But God did. He gave him recompense for what he had lost. But God allowed Job to survive because he had a purpose in mind for Job. One, he proved to Satan, first and foremost, that a servant of his can be a servant of his in any circumstance. Job proved that. And when we look back and say, I don't know how anybody can keep their Christianity when they're undergoing that, Job was not a Christian, but he was a servant of God, and that's the point. That we can be servants of God even in the most horrific of circumstances. Listen, that's an incredible sermon. That's an incredible lesson. Unless we think that only Christians read the book of Job, the book of Job is widely considered to be one of the greatest works of literature. Even if it's secular folks looking at it, considered to be one of the best works of literature on the planet because of the lessons that it contains and the way that it's written. So there's a lot of people that look at Job and still say, he's got the patience of Job. He's got the forbearance of Job. He's got the patience, whatever it might be. He's got these attributes of Job. So, absolutely. There's a purpose that God allowed Job to remain even after he had taken away everything, almost everything that meant anything to him. At the end of the day, Job had a purpose. Yeah. How many times have you heard? That's true. I think a lot of people, I wouldn't say a lot, but there are a great many people that that find their purpose after a spouse dies. They find something in themselves that they didn't realize before. They do. Whether it's man, woman, doesn't matter. They find a purpose that they didn't have before, or they didn't realize they had before. Listen, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, whatever you think of the organization, was instituted because a woman lost her child to a drunk driver, and they were very much involved in legislation and pushing for harsher penalties for people caught drunk driving, and a lot of education that came along with it. A lot of things happen because of suffering and loss in people's lives. Good things happen. There's some self-destructive things though too, right? Yeah. Well, there's a lot of people that they allow suffering. They allow it to tear them down. They allow it to destroy them, and they hold on to a sense of bitterness and anger that that arises because of because of bitterness and anger that is there towards the circumstances that they find themselves in. And unfortunately, what they do is they allow that bitterness and that anger to supplant everything else that's going on, everything good. And they are suffering, but they are suffering miserably instead of someone who is suffering and is gleaning the very best that you possibly can from the situation. And it's difficult. I want to make sure everybody understands. I don't want to brook any illusion that suffering is easy, that people are just they're weak and they just can't handle things, and therefore, listen. When someone says, "Listen, I'm hurting and I'm suffering," I take them at their word because they are. Not too many people say I'm suffering when they're not. I think at the end of the day, though, what our responsibility is to someone who is suffering and to ourselves when we're suffering is to find what good can come of it, because there's good that can come of any suffering. I don't care what it is. Believe me, I've looked through when I was putting this together. I looked through every example that I could think of when people are having a hard time and they're suffering, and I could not find one where something good couldn't come out of it. The problem is sometimes we don't see what that good thing. Sometimes the person that's suffering doesn't see that good thing. But at the end of the day, there is something good, and what we have to do is we have to help pull that. We have to pull them through that and get that to a good place where the good can start to come out and a healing can begin. It's interesting. We talk about the idea of one of the ways that we can help people who are suffering is go and sit with them and talk to them. Job had friends like that. Didn't work out too well, did it? He had 3 that showed up, and basically, they said they waited with him for 7 days. That was customary. They were silent. They didn't. You know what? I imagine Job at the end of those 7 days wished that there was another 7 days, because that's the first thing that comes out of their mouth. What'd you do? What'd you do? You deserved it somehow. What did you do? You sinned somehow, Job. What did you do? And that was their thought process. Never thinking that maybe the Lord had a plan in mind. And if the Lord has a plan in mind, there's nothing evil about it. It's meant for good. It was meant for good in Job's life. But that's what his friends did. 3 days they sat silent, or for 7 days they sat silent, and then they opened their mouths and proceeded to unload on Job. And Job's saying, with friends like these, the old song, friends like this, who knew his enemy. And then they have another young fellow that shows up. You think, okay, where's this guy going to go? And guess what? He ends up doing the same thing as the first 3. All right? But sometimes the best thing that we can do when somebody's hurting, somebody's suffering, is sit with them and talk with them and help them the very best way that we can. Sometimes it's just sitting, listening while they talk. While they talk about the loved one, while they talk about the things that are going on in their lives. I know it's not fun to sit and listen to somebody detail the extent of their injuries, or their illness, their pain, their ache, whatever it might be. It's not always fun to do that. It really isn't. And I know a lot of us, you get through about an hour of talking about it, and you start surreptitiously looking at your watch and saying, well, I think I need to get going. But you know what? At the end of the day, sometimes time is all the gift we have to give. So what do? We give that time. We have to sit there for 2 hours while they commiserate. Hey, that's what we do. Good listener. Good listener. Yeah. All right, we're going to stop because we don't want to run out of time. We're going to have we're going to start on verse 21. We're going to go all the way through 26, 21 through 26. So please, if you would, just tonight, before you put your Bible on your bedside table, go ahead and read Job 3 verses 21 through 26. So you can have it in mind. Think about these things for a couple of minutes. That way when you come in here, you can be like, oh yeah, I know what he's talking about. I remember that part of it. It might stir you on to a question. I can't guarantee that like I said, we're not going to come to an understanding of suffering in a 2-week period of time. But I will certainly give you any kind of insight I might have into it. And I don't believe in jinxing at all. I don't believe in that at all. But I hope we open up something talking about suffering. I've never had that much in my life. And I'm not probably the best person to talk to about what do you do when you suffer. I don't know. I've never truly suffered in that way. But I know people who have, and I listen to them, and I talk to them, and then we do get better. Yes, ma'am. Ms. Sybil, you had something you were going to ask? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it is. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, sir. Yeah. That's you're you're exactly right. You know, and I don't want this to be a downer, but the truth of the matter is, suffering comes into every person's life. We are going to eventually. We are. I know that there's some stuff in store for me that I'm not going to be happy with, and it's going to shake me. It may not shake my faith, and I'm praying that it won't. I'm working towards the fact that I would be able to withstand anything. But I know there's some things that are going to happen that are going to shake me, and they're going to shake me to my core. And what my prayer is that the way that I act towards others, that they'll do the same thing to me. That they'll reach out in the very best way they possibly can to help me realize that not that I'll get over it. You don't ever get over it. Someone who's lost a spouse, you don't get over it. You deal with it the very best way you can. That's about all it is. We deal with things the very best way that we can. And the Christians have an advantage over anybody else, don't we? We have an advantage. Because we know, a lot of people think, hey, life is short, then you die. Life is short and painful, and then you die. See, we look at it as life is short, it can be painful. We're going to die. The great thing about it is we're going to live forever, where we're not going to suffer. We're not going to have pain. And that's our point. That's our goal, is to understand that. And I think that gives us a bulwark against it. But I agree. Life is a highway. We're all traveling down it, right? The Christians just have a different viewpoint of it than the rest of the world. All right. Very good. Very good. All right. We're going to have a song of invitation. Speaking of the idea of suffering, sometimes some of the best thing that we can know when suffering occurs is that our brothers and sisters in Christ are praying for us. As a matter of fact, I can't think of anything better. The family up in Woodstock, they said the only thing that kept them going through all this is their faith in God and the support of their brothers and sisters in Christ. That if we didn't have that, we honestly don't know how we would have done it. And I agree. And sometimes the best thing we can do is pray for one another, and we want to extend that opportunity tonight. If we can pray for anyone, about anyone, it doesn't matter if they're here. We can pray for someone. We want to do that. But we're going to make that opportunity to make that request known while we stand and while we sing.
You and me, let us haste to its spring. 'Tis the fount of love from the source above, and it gives